Welcome, everybody, to this special edition of the Alex Thomas Show. It is my honor and privilege to have Washtenaw County Sheriff candidate Ken Magee here. Hi, Ken.
Good afternoon, Alex.
How you doing today?
I'm fantastic, but I'm getting better every day.
Hey, thank you so much for appearing. I really enjoyed our brief chats that we've had and the little time that I've gotten to know you a bit. It's been positive. I had this image before I met you of wannabe fake Democrat or something, and there's just so much information, misinformation out in rumors in this media void. But to meet you, I really know that you care about this area. That as far as that being a wannabe Democrat, that you never really actually were a Republican. That you are, I think. Well, I'll let you describe your political views. I just wanted to, up front, because there's so much misinformation out and these misperceptions, I wanted to let people know that I think you're a cool guy. I'm sure we disagree on some things, but I do know you care about this area and you have a lot of knowledge, and I think your voice needs to be really part of this discussion. So I want to let everyone tell about yourself, what you think they need to know, and then I want to just chat about 45 minutes and let people know Ken. So go ahead.
Fantastic. Well, if we didn't disagree on some things, we probably would not be honest with one another, because I'm sure there are certain things we do disagree on. And that's the spice of life, being able to dialogue and have a conversation with one another and exchange of ideas. And some of the things that I might have to say, you might disagree with, and then you go back and you think about it and you say, he might have a point, or you have a spin-off from that idea. And the same thing with me. I might hear something I disagree, and then I walk back and I say, you know what? That's interesting. I didn't think of it that way. So through time and conversations, sometimes conversations ferment like a fine wine. The longer you age it, the better it tastes. And I think that's an analogy that we could always have when people disagree or have a conversation and say, let me think about that. But the important thing to do is to be receptive to ideas. The important thing to do is to listen. And the important thing to do is to be able to communicate. And a lot of times I've been told in the past, I've heard the phrase, and I truly, truly believe it, and that is, quite frequently, you say more when you listen. And what does that mean? It means you're listening and you're absorbing. And that makes a statement about you as a person. So, speaking about me as a person.
People need to learn that. I agree, absolutely. So the listening part, I'm really suspicious when people don't ask questions and they just talk a lot and leave. It really gives a window on how open they are to other ideas and what's going on. But
So let's talk about Ken Magee, who I am, where I came from, what I represent, what I believe, and some of my experiences. In the very beginning, I'm going to say this. My mother used to teach me always to be humble. And she passed away a couple of years ago at the age of 92. She is one of the strongest Democrats Washtenaw County has ever seen. She was a social justice warrior. But as I said, she always taught me to be humble and not speak about myself, but learn about others. My campaign manager said, unfortunately, we have to go against the advice of your mother when you're running for office, because you do have to speak about yourself. You have to speak about your experiences, your professionalism, and some of the things you've accomplished in your life. So I start off by saying, I apologize to my mom, and I'm going to have to take the words of the campaign manager and speak a little bit about myself. I've had a dynamite career that I'm extremely proud of, and I think that's where my mom was talking about, saying, you've done so many things in your life that you need to be humble and always listen to other people, because you've been blessed with a great opportunity to be involved in so many different things. And we'll get into some of those things. But let's speak about me, again, where I came from. I was born and raised in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I'm a townie. I'm a Washtenaw County guy. And I know Washtenaw County like the back of my hand in so many different areas. I know Ann Arbor like the back of my hand as well. I'm a guy that was born and raised. I lived near Angel Elementary School in Ann Arbor. My dad was a doctor. My mother was a social worker. She did a lot of things in the community. And how I was raised an awful lot by my mother. As I said earlier, she was a social justice warrior. She did so much for the community. As a little boy, I'd be in tow going to NAACP meetings, having ice cream socials in disadvantaged communities, going to the premiere showing of King after Dr. King was assassinated in 1968, all sorts of things that circulated around the area of the civil rights movement. My mother would take me down and we'd see the protests on campus of the Black Action Movement organization called BAM. My mom was also involved a lot with Latino affairs. She was involved on the board of directors working with a group called ASTA, which is a Spanish acronym. She did so many different things, and I absorbed so much from my mother going to all of these events. She also had, for many, many years, her picture was at the YMCA as one of the founding members of the YMCA and helped build the building. And I think it showed her with a shovel in her hand or something like that as they were breaking ground at the YMCA, something similar to that. I don't remember exactly, but I learned an awful lot from Betty Magee. And a lot of the longtime Democrats in Ann Arbor know my mom and know what she stood for. Unfortunately, a lot of those folks are reaching that age where they're not involved in community affairs nearly as much and hopefully enjoying their retirement. So as this young boy growing up in Ann Arbor and seeing all the different things that we're involved in, Ann Arbor was a great time to be raised in the 60s and 70s. There was a lot of things happening. And as a young person, you become very impressed and you learn so much, whether it be the protests on campus or learning about some of the independent newspapers that are out there. So you just learn, you absorb a lot. But I was also a kid that was a little bit mischievous in the community. We'd get up in the morning at 8 o'clock and ride our bikes and run around. We wouldn't get home till 9 o'clock at night. And you'd do this as a 10, 12-year-old. You'd ride your bikes to the Michigan football games and you'd find a way to sneak into the games. It was just that kind of fun growing up. But when I was in high school, I was kind of a kid that didn't have direction. And then I met a police officer. Her name was Tanya Pageant. She was an African-American female officer and community resource officer at Ann Arbor Huron. She started speaking to me about me and what I wanted to do. And I remember she saw something in me. And that's one of the lessons I have learned in life. And I said, there are 3 things young people can never have too much of. And what are those 3 things? Those 3 things are mentors, role models, and heroes. Tanya Pageant got me involved in what's called a law enforcement career camp. And I went to that at the age of 15 years old. And that opened the doors for me to do a lot of things. And one of those things that I said, I want to go into law enforcement. And I ended up graduating from high school, going to college, graduated first in my class at Michigan State University in criminal justice, ultimately went to the police academy. I was elected president of the police academy, as well as graduated first in my class. To pick up then, okay? How are we doing so far?
I think great. I'm so used to doing the weekly show and I'm, hosting the show. I always have a meter in my head, like if I feel like the guest is speaking too long. So in that talk show format, I want to jump in, but I want to give you an opportunity. So I'm balancing that. I might try to cut in more, but it's okay. Yours.
I'll tell you what we can do. How about this? A little visual cue, okay? I'm watching. Okay. I'm watching you.
That's
I was going to say, if you just go like this, like you're straightening your collar, let's do that really quick. That means you want to interject. Okay?
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Sounds great. This one or this one?
No, just kind of go like this. Just kind of go like this.
I shouldn't have to do it a lot, though. Okay.
Okay. Well, you don't have to really exaggerate it either. If you just lean forward slightly and just go like this, I'll see the movement and I'll know I need to start pausing, okay?
Sounds great.
All right, I'm ready. Tell me when.
The 3 most important things, youth, that we are.
One of the things I say quite frequently is the 3 most important things that youth can have in their life is role models, heroes, and mentors. And Tanya Pageant was one of my mentors and role models. What did that do? That opened a door for me. I saw a career ahead of me. I ended up going to Michigan State University, where I graduated first in my class. I ended up getting my bachelor's degree and master's degree from there. I went to the police academy. I became the president of the police academy. And then I also graduated first in my class at the academy. So
I hadn't heard that. The first in your class at Michigan State, criminal justice, bachelor?
First in my class in the School of Criminal Justice, I graduated first. Yes.
I tell that. That's great.
I graduated with a high honor, which was shocking to my mom because I barely got out of high school. So
what about the police academy? About how many were in that class? Because that's
approximately 35. Approximately 35. And then I was also the president of the academy. So it gave me some leadership techniques from the very, very beginning. It was right around that time I also got involved in martial arts, and I had another mentor who passed away a few years ago. And he taught me a lot of lessons about discipline and learning about people and disciplining your thoughts and your mind and your body. And I took a lot of those lessons with me as well.
Which martial art?
Taekwondo. My instructor was Grandmaster Edward Sell, who had a studio in downtown Ann Arbor, which now is called Keith Hafner's Karate. And so Keith and I trained together when we were a lot younger. So mentors, role models, and heroes. And that's the point of all of that. So then what happened to Ken Magee? Ken Magee got involved in police work. He got his first job at the Jackson City Police Department. I worked there for approximately 4 years, and I saw a lot of things. But one of the things I also saw was tragedy. And tragedy comes in many forms. And this form was a police officer was shot and killed, a state trooper. And I was with him when he died. And the age of innocence was over. I was just a young 23-year-old man. And I had been working the streets, and I all of a sudden realized that this is so serious, what's going on in this profession and what I've got in regards to just growing into a man and learning about what's going on in the streets and things of that nature. Shortly after that, I was also involved in a situation where a firefighter died. The building collapsed. I was next to the firefighter. He was killed, and I lived. My point is, these life-changing, life-threatening moments shape you as a person. And so when you see a lot of things, it just gives you experiences on how to handle adversity and tragedy and how you persevere through these things. Then I became a federal agent. I worked undercover in Detroit. I was the
FBI or Justice Department? Or?
I was a member of the Drug Enforcement Administration as a special agent. I worked undercover in Detroit. I worked on the largest cocaine deal in the history of Michigan. We convinced some Colombian drug lords to deliver us 600 kilograms of cocaine, which is over 1,200 pounds of cocaine, to Grosse Ile Island here in Detroit. And we had a massive operation and ended up arresting a lot of major drug dealers. From that point, I ended up going to Bogota, Colombia. I was selected for an assignment. I learned Spanish. The government sent me to school for 6 months to speak Spanish. Went to Bogota, Colombia, and I stayed there for 7 years. At that time, it was one of the longest assignments an agent had ever had there. During that time, I learned an awful lot.
What years was that? Because that's huge, that Bogota, Colombia experience. What time frame? What years about?
Martin Luther King Day, 1989, I arrived, and I left in late 1995. It was during the heydays of the drug wars. So I was fortunate enough to be involved in numerous types of investigations. I arrested an individual by the name of Rene Benitez, who had kidnapped and shot 2 agents in 1982. And I caught him 13 years later. Kidnapped 2 federal agents and took them into the jungles and shot them both. I was also fortunate enough to be a case agent where we apprehended an FBI top 10 fugitive. I also created other programs to apprehend numerous fugitives throughout South America that were wanted from various points all around the world. I was also on the team that took down the legendary drug lord Pablo Escobar. So for the viewers that watch Narcos, that's what we call a docu-series or a docudrama where they combine fact and fiction. The 2 gentlemen that are portrayed in that series are a compilation of themselves as well as a handful of others that worked on the team that took down Pablo Escobar in Colombia. So And if you Google CNN, Ken Magee, you'll see my role in the whole Pablo Escobar investigation. They discuss it in CNN broadcasts as well as on a book that was written by a gentleman by the name of Mark Bowden, and the book is called Killing Pablo. So if you Google Ken Magee, Killing Pablo, you can learn about my role in that. From there, I eventually left Bogota after numerous experiences, and I had different assignments around the United States. And one of them was at the Olympics in 1996. And I was next to the bomb in Atlanta when it blew up. And there was one woman that died. Her name was Alice Hawthorne. She was with her daughter, Fallon Stubbs. Because I was so close to the bomb, I heard the screams of Fallon Stubbs. I worked on Fallon as I could tell that her mother, when I kneeled down next to her mother, was already gone, killed by the shrapnel. But what did I learn from that situation? I worked with Fallon. We saved her life, and I went to visit her in the hospital a couple days later. Jesse Jackson had just walked out of the room. Bill Clinton had just got off the phone with her, and I said, I just needed to see you to make sure you were okay. I didn't know her. I had never met her before, except for that night. And when we're stopping blood flowing from her body from applying pressure to the brachial and femoral arteries, the whole intent was just saving her life. And to see her in the room, and I said, I'm not Bill Clinton or Jesse Jackson. She looked at me and said, yeah, but they didn't save my life either. It brought tears to my eyes. 7 years later, I was reunited with her at the trial of Eric Rudolph, the white supremacist bomber who is the face of evil, who also bombed a gay nightclub, who also bombed an abortion clinic. I was reunited with her at the sentencing. I was the only federal agent to testify against Eric Rudolph during his sentencing.
Did he hide for like 5 years in the woods, or?
Yeah, almost, I believe it was close to 7 years. Close to 7 years. I believe the exact date, I forget exactly, but it was around 7 years. And yes, that's what he did. And I looked at him and I spoke at the sentencing hearing and I heard him speak, and he was the face of pure evil. Him and his beliefs that he was a representative of the army of God, a white supremacist, anti-gay, anti-abortion, all those things that he felt he could bring justice to by setting off bombs and killing people. Just a criminal that will spend the rest of his life in prison, thankfully, and keep the rest of us safe. But I learned some things from Fallon Stubbs as I watched her testify against him as well. And her compassion was unbelievable. Anybody watching that would have had tears in their eyes. So then I had other assignments throughout the United States. And during this time, I also had an older brother. My older brother combated substance abuse issues for many years. He ultimately died of a heroin overdose. And it was at that time I was also on numerous drug treatment prevention organizations and suicidal prevention organizations where I served on nonprofit boards. So I bring that component in. Not only was I fighting drugs, but I was also finding a way to help the youth and be involved in things. And I've always thought about different strategies all those times. I went on to ultimately, I was a chief of police for a brief amount of time. I also was a criminal justice. What's that?
You were chief of police? What municipality? What?
I was the chief of police at the University of Michigan. And one of my highlights that I always point out was when I was chief of police, President Barack Obama came and spoke on May 1st, 2010 at the University of Michigan football stadium. And I was fortunate enough to lead the dignitary protection program working with the Secret Service. And that detail in and of itself was the largest detail outside of Washington, D.C. ever to protect a sitting president. And so I had an opportunity to meet President Obama and shake his hand, and just one of the great thrills. And I still have a lot of great relationships at the university as well as within all the other federal government agencies I've worked with over the years. So as I moved forward and left law enforcement and retired, I became a criminal justice consultant. I spoke a lot about some of the problems that we face, especially with the opioid epidemic, given numerous speeches and presentations.
And I just want to let the audience know, because some of them, my regular audiences, they might think that, oh boy, he's going on a long time. You have such an interesting and an important story, and I think it's really relevant. It's so relevant with the election coming up. So that's why and you're doing a great job in a narrative format, and we're leading up to now. And after that, I have a great conversation about some of the things that are coming up. So, audience, please
I'm
carefully.
looking I'm looking forward to those questions, and I'll wrap it up. And my mom would be glad that I'm wrapping it up because, like I said earlier in the broadcast, I'm just explaining a little bit of who I am and my experiences, but seeing white supremacists attack people and having a brother die of a drug overdose and working in ambushing cocaine laboratories in South America while also trying to find strategies in preventing drug flow to the United States. All of these things can shape me as a person from the youth, the days when I was a young boy growing up in Ann Arbor, to that global experience. So in conclusion, I started looking.
Because you're about. When I jumped in, you started consulting. You know, I mean, you have an interesting story, and so I don't want to rush. I just want to let the people know. So
Okay, well, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you. So I started looking at things as a criminal justice consultant, speaking to different organizations or being involved. And I serve on other nonprofit boards. I've been on the board of directors for the Ann Arbor Summer Festival. I'm on the board of directors for the National Football Foundation, which I believe develops strong minds, healthy bodies, things of that nature. And my whole goal when I started looking at running for sheriff was to combat the opioid epidemic. And I truly believe the opioid epidemic is the #1 public health / public safety issue our country faces. When we combined public health as well as law violating, we create a scenario, the synergy of those two topics create a dynamic, tragic situation that is killing so many people. You could explore the statistics all day and look at various charts and graphs, but there's approximately 70,000 people who died last year of opioids in the United States. In the last 4 years, since the last campaign I was involved in, over 200 people have died in Washtenaw County. Just a huge problem that we face, this epidemic of opioids. Quite frequently, it is brought to my attention that we had a crack cocaine epidemic as well. And I believe the problem with the crack cocaine epidemic, it was addressed completely wrong. It was abhorrent, some of the sentencing that they had towards young African Americans that were involved in the crack cocaine trade, who might have become addicted to crack cocaine, but they were treated as drug dealers as opposed to people with a substance use disorder that needed treatment. They were sick. They weren't criminals. They were sick. And then there were those that were actual hardcore drug dealers, which is a whole nother avenue that I address. But in these experiences, I've come up with different philosophies. I've created an acronym. It's called PETER. It stands for Prevention, Enforcement, Treatment, Education, and Recovery. And as the next sheriff, I will incorporate that acronym into my philosophy because I believe that the leader of the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department should be the catalyst and the glue that brings so many groups together to fight and combat this problem from a 360 approach. But what I want to really point out, Alex, as well, is that when we look at this problem, the epidemic of the opioids, it's not somebody else's problem. It's everybody's problem. It impacts each and every community. It has no barriers. It has no geographical boundaries. So each of the components, prevention, enforcement, treatment, education, and recovery, bring a different viewpoint and a different modality into addressing the problem to fix it and solve the issues of hundreds of people, thousands of people nationwide dying. On a final note on that topic, and that is this. Currently, there's a summit once a year, I believe, that addresses the opioid epidemic. I believe that the opioids are basically our Operation Katrina. We need to have, like Hurricane Katrina, they had Operation Katrina. How are they addressing it? They would have briefings each and every day as to what is going on to stop the death, devastation, destruction, and the illness and all the problems associated with the Hurricane Katrina. It should be the same philosophy. We should be addressing this each and every day, saying, what are we doing as leaders, as opposed to having an occasional summit. And that's how dedicated I am to that problem, because I truly believe it's the number one public safety and public health issue. There are a lot of other issues that are priorities as well. And we'll get into some of those, such as restoring trust in police services, holding police accountable, transparency with police departments. And those are basically my 4 platform issues. But we can get into those in a little bit. So
I'm trying to think of any that would excuse me, I'm trying to think of any that would not be related to substance use disorder. You know, it's not.
What was your statement?
I was trying to think of any public health issue that's not related to substance use disorder or specifically opioids. I mean, I'm in agreement with you.
It's not a problem. It's an epidemic. A problem. It's not a problem. It's an epidemic. A problem is your car won't start in the morning. That's a problem. This is an epidemic that's killing people. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. And we can do so much more as long as we keep it on the front burner, like we're keeping some other topics of huge importance to our community on the front burner as well. And we're going to get a chance to get into those. So in essence, that was a synopsis of my career, some of my upbringings as a young man, how I formulated some of my thoughts, my experiences, my philosophies, and how I look at situations in life and what I believe as a human being.
All right. You know, it's such a million questions that were in that. Just you're really interesting. But given the limits of the time, we have about a half hour left. I'm going to think of from talking to other people about this race, what immediate questions they'd have. And I know when you were giving your personal, your background, you spoke very fondly of your mom and her lifelong involvement in civil rights, social justice, the Democratic Party. I could hear a lot of people in the audience. How in the hell does this guy run as a Republican? Are you really a Republican? Can you really take a couple minutes and address? Because that's something that I just hear flippantly. That's that Republican that's running, and they just dismiss you. So here's an opportunity to address that.
Well, I appreciate that. No, I'm not a Republican. Let me tell you who I am, and that is who I just described the last 25 minutes about. And when you really think about it, when I ran for sheriff before, I sent out 30,000 flyers of a picture of me shaking hands with Barack Obama. My flyer didn't ever mention Republican. It mentioned the opioid epidemic. What Republican would send out 30,000 flyers with a picture of him shaking hands with Barack Obama? No one, except for me. Why? Why did I do that? I ran as a Republican because I got into politics late. And I said, my goal is to alert the community as to the opioid epidemic. I've received kudos from numerous organizations with drug treatment prevention that said my campaign in and of itself, every debate, every meeting I went to, whether it was Republican or social gatherings or whatever it may be, I always spoke about the opioid epidemic. I put 1,000 signs up during the last campaign. It didn't say Republican. It said Magee for sheriff, fighting the heroin epidemic. My point is this. It gave me, running as a Republican all the way till November of 2016, to have a platform. And that platform was about alerting the public about what was going on. And the leaders in the treatment and prevention organizations, many of them said that my campaign in and of itself brought so much awareness to so much of the problem that we face with the opioids. And that is why I did it. And there are some people that would like to vilify me and crucify me. But I will say this, it gave me a platform. It gave me the opportunity to meet with all sorts of groups. And when it comes to the opioid epidemic, I really believe that people need to put the Republican and the Democrat situation aside and say we all need to get together to solve this problem and to work towards it. So in answer to your question, for the people that would like to just randomly say, oh, he ran as a Republican, listen to the reason why I ran as a Republican. And then once I got involved in the process, I quickly changed parties after the 2018 election, and I filed the paperwork. I even renounced my membership in the Republican Party. I went to a meeting and spoke to him and said, I am renouncing my membership. I even went to the county clerk's office and filed the paperwork to renounce my membership and join the Democratic Party as an active candidate. So for those who bring that up, I ask that you please open your ears, open your mind, and understand that just because somebody ran in one party doesn't mean that he embraces the ideals of that party. It means he's finding an area to get a word out on what he felt was a problem. I gained a lot of experience. I learned a lot. I met a lot of people on both sides with both parties and had a lot of engaging conversations with folks. So again, for those folks that want to address the fact that I ran one time as a Republican, I'll also refresh their memory. Debbie Dingell was a Republican at one time. Elizabeth Warren was a Republican at one time. There are other, we could go down, those are just two names that come to the top of my head. There are numerous other politicians that have changed parties. Bernie Sanders had his situations as well. He ran as an independent.
Bernie registered as a Republican at one time?
No, he did not. Not the slightest. And I'm glad you clarified that. My point is he ran as an independent and then as a Democrat. So my point is a different party. There are people that have migrated from one party to another. And that's their right. That's their entitlement. But the idea is to look at, I believe, is the person and what they represent versus casting a broad brush because you ran for one political party or another. And I hope that's answered your questions. And what I will say this to your viewing audience and please grab a pencil and a piece of paper and you'll have a chance at the end of the interview as well. My telephone number is 503-781-3174. I've answered this question many, many times. If my opponent likes to exploit the fact that I ran as a Republican, that's his option. I've got a lot of information I can exploit about my opponent as well. But my point is, I've explained myself, I think, very well. And I've won over the hearts of so many Democrats because they see the passion, they see the commitment, and they understand exactly why I did what I did. If they don't want to listen, or if they have a preconceived opinion or cast a broad brush, my response to that is, that's your right. But I do believe that closing your mind just because somebody ran as Republican is one of the things that is impacting our society. Just as if a Republican closed his mind when a Democrat was speaking to them and not listening and not communicating, which is what you and I spoke about in the first 30 seconds of this broadcast. I hope I've answered your question.
And I hope you did to the satisfaction of the audience and those thoughtful people out there, the ones that consider themselves thoughtful and care about this area, that you just can't go by the narrative that's out there. If you care, check out the race, look at stuff like this. I saw the article in Live about your candidacy, and I had been in that aforementioned crowd that was just so dismissive because I knew you ran as a Republican. When I read that article, though, and I saw your comments about the opioid crisis, and that doesn't sound like a Republican with it. It was eye-opening, and that's what made me reach out. Would it be fair to say that you come from a harm reduction perspective solidly in substance use addiction, or is that too simplistic, or what would you say?
I'm never going to say it's too simplistic. I believe that harm reduction in some areas is extremely valuable because we have to keep people alive to ultimately get them treatment. I don't think that when you look at, for example, Narcan is a harm reduction strategy. I think it's extremely important to have our Narcan with every police officer, as well as available to the general public, to the family members, things of that, people, anyone associated with trying to save lives, or a family that has somebody suffering from this deadly disease of substance use disorder to opioids. But it's a Band-Aid. It's not a cure. It's not a remedy. It's not a strategy. It's a Band-Aid. It keeps people alive. We need to do so much more than Narcan. So would it be fair to say harm reduction? Absolutely. But I still believe that serious drug dealers do need to be held accountable, because they prey off the innocent, they prey off the young, they prey off those sick individuals that have these disorders. But what's important in this world of today is to redefine the word what drug dealer is and drug trafficker. By law, if you go and score and purchase 3 grams of heroin and turn around and keep 1 gram for yourself and sell 2 grams to 2 of your friends for $20 each, by law, you're a drug dealer. In my eyes, you're just a guy trying to survive in regards to getting your fix and each and every day quashing the dragon inside you to have this high that you need because you're physically addicted to it. You're not a drug dealer, you're a sick person. And that's not a drug dealer, but by the law you are. And when I'm elected sheriff, I'm going to address those matters and say, those aren't crimes we lock people up for. Those aren't crimes that we enforce. Those are crimes that we utilize as a catalyst to get the person into treatment and substance. For example, I'm looking at taking part of the jail and turning it into a recovery unit. For those that are incarcerated for other crimes that may have been committed due to the fact that they're committing crimes to support their illness. And for example, if somebody gets arrested for breaking into a home and they're sentenced to 90 days in jail or 180 days in jail, whatever the case may be, they're in there because they broke into the home to score cash to be able to go out and get their drugs. Well, they're not being locked up for a drug offense, but let's start treating them immediately. And I'm not talking about just having a once a week meeting with a counselor or an AA meeting once a week. I'm talking about round the clock treatment in a facility. How do I pay for it? How do I pay for it? I get rid of some of the top heavy positions at the sheriff's department, and for every one of those positions I get rid of, I can hire 2 substance use disorder addiction specialists to work within the jail and to work with the community in the jail to get people on the right track while they're incarcerated. So back to your original topic.
What you just outlined, if I could, is when your plans for the jail, that is a harm reduction, a harm reduction philosophy. I wouldn't want, and I work with, I don't want to mention their name, but I'm a board member, and because I don't want to distract the conversation, of a supporting housing nonprofit that's really committed to harm reduction. So I wouldn't want to reduce it to just Narcan, and because I know some of them are watching. But what you outlined, that idea of you're treating the holistic life situation and not and also reducing the harm from that addiction and stabilizing. That's when I'm saying harm reduction, and I think that's what you articulated about in the jail.
And I think when you look at the acronym, Peter, prevention, enforcement, treatment, education, and recovery. Enforcement is a very small part of it, but sometimes enforcement is the catalyst to get the person into treatment and ultimately recovery. And in each of those areas, I go much more into depth. And if anybody wants to see another brief synopsis on that, they can Google my name and go to a YouTube video, and that I spontaneously gave an interview to somebody who asked me on the street what my philosophy was. And I like the fact that it was raw, direct, on the street, and not pre-prepped, and speaking from the heart.
If someone said that the drug war was a complete failure and was actually a war on poor blacks, whites, and sick people, would you have issue with that, or what would be your response?
Well, I think the drug war not only impacts the ethnicities you just described, I think it impacts everyone. I often say this: we may never win the war against drugs, but we will win the battles we choose to fight. And what does that mean? That means there's always people that are going to come back in and pick up the place of another drug dealer or somebody that will fill the void to deal the drugs. So the goal is to combat the battles we choose to fight and to win those victories. I think the war against substance abuse will be a continuing war for years and years and years and years, whether it be alcoholism that we're continuously combating and finding new strategies to treat people with through substance use disorder studies, or heroin or cocaine or methamphetamine. I don't believe in the legalization of drugs. I believe in the decriminalization of marijuana. I believe that marijuana is something that I don't think a lot of young people should experiment with, but I also believe that it clouds the issues of some of the more dynamic drugs that we need to combat, such as the heroines, the opioids, and things of that nature. And when I look at this whole category, such as what you just described, again, it's combating, or it's attacking certain situations and battling and having a combat against certain areas, each and of themselves. For example, methamphetamine crisis, combating methamphetamine in some of the more rural parts of the country where laboratories were popping up, and looking at how pseudoephedrine was distributed through pharmacies and creating laws and things of that nature. That reduced the amount of what they call mom and pop laboratories. We won that battle. What did we do? We diverted some of the methamphetamine manufacturing to larger scale laboratories in other areas. Then we attacked that battle. And what do we do at the exact same time? We're hoping that the prevention and the treatment and the education and recovery world are also doing their job and providing those services. But once again, when you combine all five of them, you create a 360 approach towards combating the issues.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I mentioned what brought you to my attention with reading that MLive article and your comments about the opiate epidemic. That was what brought you to my attention, and then talking to you and realizing you're a viable candidate and someone that people really need to consider. So that was the first motivation. Secondly, it was as a community advocate. I want to work with the Sheriff's Department for the safest community possible, and I think that Derek Jackson, Kathy on the community side, Kathy Wyatt, they do some great work in the community. But in that political arena, I really feel like that our law enforcement community in the county has overreach. I feel like Greg Dill and Jerry Clayton in tandem are acting as if de facto county executives. I feel like the Sheriff's Department has been supporting one prosecutorial candidate, and I know I've been lobbied on Sheriff Department time and hours to support a particular candidate. Other people in the civic political area, they'll say things, Jerry runs the county, Greg and Jerry run the county. So putting that out there and getting a serious discussion and among thoughtful people in the community, is there law enforcement overreach? What the real picture is? What does it mean when we give more money to law enforcement to address mental health, juveniles, and substance use disorder? So that was my second motivation for getting you on, is like putting law enforcement in that political arena and at least discussing that and outlining and having really thinking thoughtfully as a community about that. Democracy is ruled by the people, not the police. It's not just a tagline. It's here for Washtenaw County. I mean, we need an engaged public citizenry. So that's my spiel. I want to give you a chance to respond to those thoughts and
Sure.
why I had.
Sure. Well, let me address a few things right off the bat. You mentioned two individuals. Both of those individuals, Derek Jackson and Kathy Wyatt, work for the sheriff, and they're also engaged heavily in politics. I feel that's a conflict of interest. I feel that's a huge conflict of interest.
And I like them both.
I'm not saying they're not good people. What I'm saying is I believe that you should prioritize yourself. If you work for the Sheriff's Department, you should not be involved in politics. And there's a policy that refers to that. So with that being said, at the Sheriff's Department, there's a policy that talks about engaging in politics. I just don't think that's right. I think it's a violation of policy, and I also believe it's utilizing the office in an appropriate manner. The minute you're a high-ranking official at the Sheriff's Department as an employee of the sheriff and not the actual candidate themselves and begin inserting yourself into politics, I believe you've crossed the line. Well, that
policy, please. I'm going to post that. It's important. Please,
what's that? I don't I don't have the policy, but
Well,
it's,
yeah, I know not right now, but you know.
I don't have it, but it's policy. I believe it's policy 1.1 or 1.19 rules and regulations, and it discusses the involvement in political elections. And I just believe that that's inappropriate, unethical, and you could even push it to a certain line that it might be a violation of Michigan election law. So we'll move past that. I'm not pleased about that one bit, because I do not believe the office of the sheriff should be involved at all with its employees involved and engaging in politics, especially for the sheriff himself.
Ken, I wanted somebody else to say that, man. It's your show. Say what
So let me move past that. And who would hold those employees accountable for violating those rules? The sheriff himself. And does the sheriff allow his employees to do that? Apparently he does, because he's not enforcing the rules, his own rules. So then we move into another topic, and it comes along with, you talk about people running the county and holding people accountable. The sheriff reports to no one except for the voters. That's all he reports to. Every 4 years, they make a decision. Accusations against the sheriff himself, they don't need to be investigated, because nobody investigates the sheriff unless the sheriff asks for an investigation. Your viewers have probably seen on other platforms numerous allegations I've made against the sheriff for using the
I
office.
want people to know, Mike, I don't think, it comes as a lot of a surprise, at least I'll say some, him being the CEO of a consulting group, criminal justice or law enforcement consulting, and having a contract with the Department of Corrections. The Cardinal 2 group, I believe.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to start rumors. I would like inquiry into some serious, a serious issue that needs to be explored. I've seen the documents that you had. It gives me, I'm just really suspicious why other media outlets haven't put them on display or put them in the community discussion. But it's serious, and it's not rumor mongering or anything. It's a real issue. So I'll put it on.
Okay, well, thank you for putting that out there. And let me clarify something with your audience first. First off, facts are not attacks. Facts are not a smear campaign. Facts are facts. And it does no one any good to say that some of the create rumors, unless you have fact-based evidence, which I have. I also want to clarify with your viewers as well, as I want this story with you to be about me and what I bring to the table as much as I can, and speak about my experiences and background and all the things that we've had to say. But I would be remiss with the fact that part of my candidacy is also saying that I will be present. I will be in the moment. I will be a proactive sheriff, not a reactive sheriff. I will be in the community, and I will not be on the road doing things and having training classes in other parts of the country or whatever. But during my time running for office, it was brought to my attention by numerous employees, several at the sheriff's department, that not only is the sheriff an absentee sheriff, but he's also doing some things that are highly unethical and possibly criminal. And again, facts are facts, and they're not attacks. So you asked me to briefly touch on it, and I will. The sheriff owns a company called the Cardinal Group 2. The sheriff's company does private consulting of police training. I am not saying there's anything wrong with police training. I'm saying the method and the way this is conducted is unethical. The sheriff recently, in 2018, 2 years into his last election, engaged in a contract with the state of Michigan to teach police officers mental health training. The sheriff received a contract for $1.1 million for that contract. And that was a personal contract. I have invoices. I have a copy of the contract. I have invoices where the sheriff has mailed a check for $31,000 a month. The invoices indicate the home address of the sheriff. If you research the Cardinal Group further, you'll see that one of the employees at the sheriff's office is a gentleman by the name of Eric Waddell. He's the training officer. He makes $92,000 a year from the county of Washtenaw to be the training officer for the sheriff's department. He is also the individual that is running portions of the training for the Cardinal Group. Jerry Clayton's private company. So you've crossed the line of hiring an employee that works for you in a law enforcement setting to now work for your private company. You take it one step further, and that is, in order to have that $1.1 million contract, you have to train police officers, a certain amount of them, throughout the state of Michigan. I have numerous emails from various law enforcements that show Eric Waddell using Washtenaw County servers, soliciting opportunities for people to engage in this training with the catchphrase, the training is free. So local law enforcement agencies will send officers to this training, and the training is free for the local agencies. However, the sheriff is receiving a bonus as his $1.1 million contract. In other words, he utilizes his position, he utilizes his employees to conduct this training here in Washtenaw County. He even sends his own employees to this training. So you're utilizing your own people to go to this training, which basically helps the numbers for you to abide by the regulations of the contract. If you take it one step further.
Well, has he commented about this publicly? I'll let you finish. I mean,
I'll get into that. I'll get into that in just 1 second. And then you take it one step further. The contract also requires that he has a sub website called managingmentalhealthcrisis.com. And that website basically promotes the training of mental health issues. And the contract also requires, in year 2 of the contract, to have intellectual development disorder training for police officers, autism training, things of that nature. And year 3, substance use disorder training for police officers and public first responders. My point is, you take a look at 3 of society ills: mental health, intellectual development disorders, and substance use disorders, and the sheriff has a $1.1 million contract to combat all 3 of those. Utilizing the office, first off, one of your employees, 2, helping develop the training, and then we could get into some other connections with other community, Washtenaw County community organizations such as Community Health, and utilizing their service as well for your private company is totally unethical. So you go to managingmentalhealthcrisis.com and you'll see one of the companies, there's a page on that talking about endorsements. And one of the endorsements for the managing mental health training is the Sheriff's Department logo. So you're now utilizing the Sheriff's Department logo, endorsing your own private company. So another one is community mental health. I'd like to know in community mental health, who gave authorization to use that logo to endorse a private company? You can't do that. You can't do that as a governmental agency endorse profit-making ventures. So what do you have? You have the sheriff. He has an employee who's running his company. You have another employee at the Sheriff's Department by the name of Emily Ahrens. She makes $92,000 a year as a head of HR. If you go to the Cardinal Group 2, you'll see that the Cardinal Group 2 has her also working for the Cardinal Group 2. You mentioned Derek Jackson earlier. Derek Jackson also works for the Cardinal Group 2 as an employee if you go to the website. My point is this: you're an elected leader. Run the department you were elected to run, and don't run a multi-million-dollar company on the side utilizing the employees of the Sheriff's Department to supplement A, your income, and B, supplement your company. People who work in the Sheriff's Department should be fully committed to that. But there's no one that has oversight over the sheriff to look at this situation. If I was the gentleman sitting in that chair that Jerry Clayton is occupying, I would say, if these allegations come forward against me for any reason or any other reasons, I'm going to contact the Attorney General's office and say, come and investigate me and tell me if we're doing anything wrong here. You asked if the sheriff's commented on it. We had a League of Women Voters, very briefly. The topic came up, and he basically, it was a forum. It's a forum. Okay. A forum is a very,
I went to one of theirs. I know.
Right. It's a series of questions. God bless them, but it doesn't allow for engagement, a question and answer type of a period between the candidates. I would love to have Jerry Clayton sit down and speak to me for 15 minutes and try and answer the questions that I had as him as an elected law enforcement leader doing what he's doing. I might add, the Cardinal Group also trains across the United States other classes. They also, for example, you Google the Cardinal Group in Ingham County, you'll see where 2 contracts were generated by Jerry Clayton's company to provide animal control training and 911 training in Ingham County. There's other contracts that are out there. We could go ad nauseum. I have file folders full of it. But my point is, once again, you're utilizing the office for personal financial gain. And what was his response? He said, I'm very proud of the fact after a 30-year career in law enforcement that I own a private company and I have not taken 1 penny of resources from Washtenaw County. I disagree wholeheartedly. The minute you start using employees, the minute you start using email servers, and I've got the email servers. I'm going to end it on this note. One email that I have is written by Eric Waddell that was sent to every law enforcement leader and law enforcement criminal justice education leader in this county. And it solicits positions for people wanting to come to the training. Do you want to send your employees to this training? It is being sponsored by the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Department, topic managing mental health. You're sponsoring. Now you're utilizing the facilities of Washtenaw County for your private company. Completely wrong, completely unethical, and if you really push to shove, it's embezzlement and it's fraud on the taxpayers, because those employees and those resources are meant for the taxpayers and the people, not to pad the pockets of Jerry Clayton's personal company. When he said he hasn't taken a dime, he not only was being dishonest, he's disingenuous, and it's an insult to everyone. And I don't take these allegations seriously. My background is in making sure of truth and justice, making sure that we tell the truth and that we work hard to hold people accountable. And I don't take allegations like this lightly. My point is, if I didn't have a whole file full of evidence that I've obtained through the Freedom of Information, through the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, Ann Arbor Police Department, and numerous other organizations, I wouldn't be saying these things. But I have the proof. I have the evidence. And the sheriff says he's doing nothing wrong. And I have demanded that he give an explanation. No response. No response.
You know, we only have a short time. Thank you so much for that. I can't wait to talk to you again. I'm seeing us on my personal page or another time really explaining the public safety mental health millage and how that process came out, because that exactly how those resources were allocated, that's not really understood by as many people as should.
When you have a $1.1 million contract from the state of Michigan, and you've also utilizing resources that are in essence being supported by some of that millage, once again, that's wrong. And again, I am going to say this. These topics are huge: mental health, substance use disorder, and working towards some of the other ills that society have. I'm not complaining that we're addressing them. I'm saying it's profiting, being a profiteer off of society's ills. When you're the lead law enforcement and elected leader of an organization in the county, that is wrong. So let's get into some other key points about my campaign, and
you got about 5 minutes,
and let the audience make their own decisions whether that's unethical behavior. Again, it's all documented. Anybody wants to call me or get a package or see more of this information, I'm more than willing to share with it. And why isn't the local media picking up on it? I'll let your audience, and some of them are aware of it, some of them are investigating it, and I'll let your audience reach their own conclusions as to why they have not reported it at this time. So with all due respect, can we get back to me and away from Jerry Clayton's unethical behavior?
I want to talk about Jerry Moore. No, I'm just kidding. No, Rick, we only have a couple minutes left. I'd like to give you the last 2 or 3 minutes, really make your pitch to the voters, and you and I can talk again, and I know we're going to talk again. I hope it's on air. But yeah, what is 2-3 minutes? What do you want the voters of Washtenaw to know this Tuesday?
Well, I want them to know that I'm a person that has passion, I'm focused, and my energy comes from the ability to assist and help people, to listen to people and understand exactly what they need, and to bring a different voice, a different face, and a different set of ideas. I can guarantee you this, I'm 100% committed behind my campaign, my platform. The platform, again, is to restore trust in police services, to ensure accountability at all levels of the Sheriff's Department, to improve transparency within Washtenaw County Police Services, and to combat the opioid epidemic. What I'd like to do briefly is tell you a story. And the story is this. And it summarizes me as a person, summarizes exactly what I think. And that is, almost a decade ago, I was at a seminar for law enforcement. There was approximately 100 people at this seminar, and I was one of the speakers. And it was before lunch. And I gave a presentation for about a half hour, and I'm going to synopsize it into about 2 minutes. And as I look out at the audience, I see about 100 police officers. 90 of them were white, 10 were black. 90 of them sitting at 9 different tables. 10 of them. Was
Went on mute.
parallels of Dr.
You went on mute for a second. You said 10 of them sitting at different tables, and then after that, it clicked on mute for some reason.
Sure. So we had about 100 people in this room, 90 black police officers, federal agents, and 10 black federal agents. One table filled with black guys, 9 tables filled with about 90 different black men and women that were involved in law enforcement. The topic of the conversation, the similarities between Dr. Martin Luther King and police officers. And that caught their attention very quickly. And I said to them, how many people here see the parallels between you and one of the greatest civil rights icons and one of the greatest men ever to walk the face of the planet? And they all kind of look at me like, where's this conversation going? And so I said, all of you, let's talk about the similarities. I said, all of you raise your hand if you swore to uphold truth and justice. And you took an oath, and they all raised their hand. I say, Dr. Martin Luther King's, one of his most famous phrases was, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. All of you fight for justice. You don't want to see injustice. You fight for it just the way that he did. Just the way that he did. And I go in, I give numerous parallels into that topic. And then I say, another key similarity that all of you have with this gentleman, Dr. King, and that is this. You have the ability to move the masses. A burning building, an accident, you say, move people, come this way, they all follow you. Dr. King had the ability to move the masses with his message. His message, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Peace through voice, peace through peaceful protests. And then I move in, going further into the conversation, I get deeper into that topic, but then I get into the third topic, and that is this. How many of you have been to a police officer's funeral in your life? And they all raised their hand. I said, yes, you have, because you all knew that you would make the ultimate sacrifice. The day before Martin Luther King was assassinated, he had talked and spoke in his speech about reaching the mountaintop. He had a premonition that he would be killed. He would be killed at the young age of 39 years old for what he believed in. He knew that he may make the ultimate sacrifice for what he believed in, just like all of you. And so each of these topics we went much more into depth and spoke about. But at the very end, I said, so now, that's my synopsis, because I have studied Dr. Martin Luther King since I was a little boy. I can talk to you about the Selma, the marches, Selma to Montgomery, letters from a Birmingham jail, you name it. And I look at these similarities. And these are the things that I feel inside when I look at society and what I bring to the table on my thought process. And so, how did I end the seminar? How did I end that presentation? I said, well, we're about ready to break for lunch. And I'd love all of you all to get together when they have these boxed lunches that we bring. And why don't you shake it up a little bit? And why don't some of the white guys go sit with the black guys and some of the black guys go sit with the white guys and talk about some of these things? Because that's the only way we're going to create change. Because if we can't create change within ourselves, how are we going to create change in society? And afterwards, I had so many people come up to me after that seminar, after that presentation, and after lunch, and during lunch, and just said, that was an amazing parallel that you gave that we've never spoke about ever in our lives. And I was extremely proud of that. And those comments came from black men, black women, or white men and white women, all police officers. And that is who I represent. I represent the people. I want your audience to know that story, not only that story, but my entire background, and that I'm completely focused on what I do, and I care about people, and I care about accountability of the police. And if you look at those 4 platform points, 3 of them touch on accountability of the police, and 1 of them talks about saving lives in general, when in reality, all of them talk about saving lives. So I basically bring this to a close unless you have any other questions. And I, again, encourage people, if you get a chance, you can go to my website, MageeforSheriff.com. That will basically tell you where to go to my Facebook page, which talks about a lot of these things. Or you can call me at 503-781-3174. I love engaging with people. I love speaking to people. We may not agree on everything, but I think anyone in the community agrees on one thing, and that is saving and protecting lives is paramount, and working together and communicating with one another is paramount towards creating a society that we can all live in together, peacefully, happily, and in brotherhood.
Hey, before we go, are there going to be any places they can catch you before Tuesday at, or any special events, or just call you up if they really want to get a hold of you?
Well, the COVID has kind of put a damper on some of these public gatherings. There are some other organizations I'm speaking to about doing some outreach. I'm not sure when your broadcast is going to be made. I'm also speaking with Contacto later on today in Spanish, so I hope to bring another viewpoint towards the Hispanic listeners as to some of my thoughts and philosophies. I hope to be in Ypsilanti at some functions this weekend, and we'll keep you posted on those. And if I get more exact details as to the time, I'll get hold of you on that. So, but I'm looking forward to engaging. But again, and I might miss something too, that people could contact me. They've got my phone number. They can call me and say, hey, come to this one, or we'd like to speak to you, because I'm available 24/7, every day of the week, every day of the year.
Thank you so much, Ken. Good luck on Tuesday. I really appreciate it. We're going to be talking more. We need more thoughtful people like you engaged in part of this process.
I want to end it by saying this: ultimate power leads to ultimate corruption. Police officers should always be held accountable for their actions, as well as the community needs to be held accountable for their actions if they're illegal. And that's why we have police, to hold people accountable. And in essence, the whole spectrum of that conversation is this: we hold police accountable, but the police need to hold lawbreakers accountable. But there's so much more besides lawbreakers that the police can do to engage in society and make it a much better place to live. And the very first thing is communication. And I look forward to communicating with your audience at any given time. And I thank you for the opportunity to let me speak.
You're very welcome. Thanks, Ken. Good luck on Tuesday.
Okay. Bye-bye.